Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be going over Act 4 of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Please make sure that you have paper and pencil, and the first thing you need to do is label the top of the paper with what you see highlighted here on the screen, Act 4 notes. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Act 4, like the other acts in the play that we've read so far, is divided into two scenes, so we're going to talk about scene 1 first. Go ahead and put this as your first subheading on your notes, and once you've done that, you can move on to the next slide. When we left off in Act 3, I want to take just a second and talk about the major events that happened in that part of the play. First, Titania is still in love with Bottom. So if you remember in Act 3, Oberon decided to put the potion from the flower on Titania's eyes, and his whole reason for doing that is because he wanted the boy that Titania has. He did that, and when Titania woke up, the first thing that she saw was Bottom. But it wasn't Bottom as he normally is, it was Bottom with the head of a donkey. So since that was the first living thing that she saw, that's what she fell in love with, and at this point in the play, they are still very much in love. Also, we have the 4 Athenian lovers. At this point, they are all asleep in the forest. If you think back to Act 3, Oberon and Puck realized that they had really made a pretty big mess out of the love triangle between the Athenian lovers, and so they're trying to fix it. And the way that they're doing that is Puck has once again put the potion on Lysander's eyes. He's hoping that when Lysander wakes up, he will see Hermia. He'll fall in love with Hermia. Remember, Demetrius is already in love with Helena, and so he thinks that will right all of the wrongs that he's done throughout the night. Now that we've gone over the major events in Act 3, let's go ahead and move on to Act 4. When Act 4 begins, we see Titania and Bottom. And again, like I said just a minute ago, Titania is very, very in love with Bottom. She's having all of her fairies tend to him, and she actually wants her fairies to get something to eat, and he requests hay. Eventually, the two lovers do fall asleep together, at which point Oberon and Puck enter, and they're watching them sleep together. Oberon tells Puck that he actually saw Titania earlier in the woods, and this is not something that we actually see happen in the play. This is just Oberon telling the story. And he tells Puck that Titania was so in love with Bottom that she no longer wanted the child, so she did give the child to Oberon, which means Oberon has accomplished what his original plan was to begin with. Go ahead and copy what you see highlighted on the screen, and then you can move on to the next slide. So Oberon, seeing Titania sleeping with Bottom, actually does feel kind of sorry for her. He feels some pity for her. He has what he wants. He got the boy, so he decides that he is going to break the spell. He does, and once he does, Titania wakes up, and she is grossed out by Bottom. She's so disgusted. She doesn't understand how or why she ever loved Bottom to begin with. Now, the fairies discover that it's almost morning, and so they decide that they are going to travel to a different part of the world, a place where it's still nighttime, and they're going to go away and they're going to dance together, which is kind of odd considering they seem to have just let go or forgotten about all the trouble that they were having earlier in the play. But nonetheless, that's what they decide to do. Puck also restores Bottom's head, so now Bottom no longer has the head of a donkey. He has his own head back. Go ahead and copy what you see highlighted on the screen and then move on to the next slide. At this point, we are introduced to the 4 lovers again. Remember, that's Demetrius, Lysander, Hermia, and Helena. They are sleeping in the forest, and Theseus and Hippolyta enter the forest with all of their attendants. They actually have the hunting dogs out, and they're listening to the hunting dogs as they're hunting. And they end up finding all 4 lovers asleep. Now, Theseus assumes that these 4 lovers must have come into the forest to celebrate May Day, which is a holiday that they were celebrating at the time, and they must have known that Theseus was going to be there, and so that's why they went into the forest. Obviously, we as the reader, we know that's not true, but that's what Theseus thinks. The 4 lovers wake up, and we do discover that the potion has worked. Lysander is now back in love with Hermia. Demetrius, who had the potion on his eyes throughout the night, is in love with Helena, and all seems to be well. When Theseus sees that, he orders that both couples follow him to the temple for a wedding feast, and he decides that they are all going to get married on that day. So not only are Theseus and Hippolyta going to get married, but Lysander and Hermia are going to get married, and Demetrius and Helena are going to get married as well. Please copy what you see highlighted on the screen and then move on to the next slide. So Theseus and Hippolyta exit the scene, and the four lovers are all left together, and they're kind of looking at each other, and they are very confused. They're not sure what happened the night before. It all seems very foggy and hazy in their mind, and they agree that maybe it was all just a dream. There is a quote that I want to point out from Demetrius. He says, "Are you sure we're awake? It seems to me like we're still sleeping, still dreaming. Do you remember seeing the Duke here? Did he tell us to follow him?" So again, this just shows that they're very confused about what's going on. Go ahead and copy what you see highlighted on the screen and then move on to the next slide. At the very end of Act 4, Scene 1, we do go back to where Bottom is. He finally wakes up, and he's kind of in the same boat. He thinks that it was all a dream as well. And in true Bottom fashion, he decides that he needs to go back to the tradesmen. He's going to find Quince, and he's going to tell Quince that he needs to write a ballad of his dream to perform at the end of the play. Go ahead and copy what you see highlighted, and then you can move on. So that does it for Act 4, Scene 1. We're going to go ahead and move into Scene 2. So give your notes another subheading with what you see highlighted on the screen, and then you can move on. Act 4, Scene 2 is all about the tradesmen, and so here's just another reminder of what happened the last time that we saw the tradesmen. When we saw them last, they were in the forest and they were practicing their play. Things were going pretty well, but this is when Puck turned Bottom's head into the head of a donkey, and it terrified the tradesmen. When they saw Bottom with his head as the head of a donkey, they ran away. They thought he was a monster, and they fled from the forest. So when we pick up in Act 4, Scene 2, this is what we see. All the tradesmen are meeting at Quince's house, and they're very worried about Bottom. They got separated when they ran away from the forest, and they think maybe he's been kidnapped. Now, they're also very worried about their play. Remember, they're practicing this play for the wedding that's going to be happening, and they're worried that it's going to be ruined because they feel like the only person who can really play the part of Pyramus is Bottom. At this point, Snug also announces that the Duke has been married, so the wedding did go on, and that there are 2 or 3 more lords and ladies who got married as well. And as the reader, we know that that's Lysander and Hermia and Demetrius and Helena. Please copy what you see highlighted here on the screen, and then you can move on to the next slide. So Bottom does return. He burst into the door, and the men are so happy to see him. And Bottom brings some good news. He tells the men that they have to go right now. They have to leave at once and go to the Duke's palace to perform their play. I do like this line from Bottom. It says, "And no one eat any onions or garlic. If we have sweet-smelling breath, I'm sure they'll say it's a sweet play. Now no more talking. Get busy, go." That is just the most Bottom line, I think, in the whole play. Please make sure that you copy what you see highlighted on the screen, and once you've done that, you are finished with your notes for today.